All right, let's jump into today's deep dive. We're going to be heading back in time to 1939. The year Gone with the Wind hit the big screen, and folks were turning to a different kind of magic back then to help navigate life.
Word magic.
You got it! We're diving into word magic, test answers to 100 everyday situations by Elmer Wheeler.
Interesting.
It's like, imagine this vintage self-help book, but packed with all these snappy scripts.
Oh, I like that.
They're called, get this, sizzlegrams.
Sizzlegrams.
Yeah, and they were like designed to help you handle all those awkward moments life throws at you.
Oh, like what?
Well, things like how to handle a cheap date or what to say if you get caught speeding, those kinds of things.
So this Elmer Wheeler, was he like some kind of smooth talker?
Oh, he was more than that. This guy, he was a former newspaperman turned sales guru.
Really?
Yeah, and get this, his techniques were so effective that big name companies like the Hoover Company and American Airlines, they actually used his methods in their training programs.
Wow, that's impressive. So what's the secret sauce? What is this word magic all about?
Well, the heart of it is what Wheeler called sizzle words. Words that instead of like appealing to logic, they hit you right in the feels.
So bypassing the brain and straight to the heartstrings.
Exactly. He believed that we humans are way more driven by our emotions than we realize.
That makes sense.
And so if you can tap into those feelings, well, you can really influence people in some pretty powerful ways.
Okay, I'm starting to see the magic here. But how did he break this all down? Like, did he have some step-by-step system or something?
He did. He had what he called the 5 Wheeler points. Think of them like his golden rules for really nailing communication.
All right, lay him on me.
Right. Number 1 is pure gold. He says, don't sell the steak, sell the sizzle.
Ooh, I like that. What does that even mean, though?
It means don't just focus on the facts, focus on the experience. Like when you're buying a car, you're not really buying horsepower, are you? You're buying the feeling of freedom.
Yeah, the open road, the wind in your hair.
Yeah. Exactly. So it's about painting that picture, creating that emotional connection.
Instead of just throwing a bunch of stats and figures around.
Exactly. And this isn't just about selling stuff. It's about relationships, asking for a favor, or even like smoothing over an argument.
If you can make that emotional connection, you're going to get your point across.
Wow, this is making me rethink how I talk to people. What's next?
All right, Wheeler point number 2 is all about keeping it short and sweet. He says, don't write telegraph.
Okay, so no rambling on and on.
Nope. Wheeler knew that people have short attention spans, especially when you're making that first impression. And let's be honest, with Twitter and instant messaging these days, that advice has never been more important, has it?
It's like they say, brevity is the soul of wit, and it looks like persuasion too.
Okay, so steak, sizzle, short and sweet.
What else? All right, number 3 is where things get a little theatrical. He says, say it with flowers.
Wait, is he literally talking about flowers?
Not necessarily. It's more about like going beyond just words, using actions, gestures, even props to really drive home your message.
So it's not just what you say, but how you say it.
Exactly. It's about that whole package, making sure your body language and tone of voice are all on point.
I like it. Okay, what's next?
Wheeler point number 4 is a sneaky one. It's don't ask if, ask which.
Ooh, that sounds strategic. I need more details.
Okay, so it's all about giving choices, but framing them in a way that subtly steers people towards the outcome you want.
Well, that's smart. So instead of asking, want to go out to dinner, you'd say, do you prefer Italian or Thai?
Exactly. You're still giving them a choice, but you're nudging them towards going out to dinner.
It's like mind control, but in a good way.
All right, last but not least, Wheeler point number 5. He says, watch your bark.
Oh, so it's not just what you say, it's how you say it.
Exactly. Your tone of voice, your emphasis, even your pauses, they all play a part.
Because, think about it. The same words can have totally different meanings depending on how you deliver them.
Exactly. Okay, so we've got the sizzle, the telegram, the flowers, the choices, and the bark. Sounds like a recipe for communication mastery.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But how do we actually put all this into practice?
Well, that's where the sizzlegrams come in. Remember those pre-written scripts I mentioned?
Oh, yeah, the ones for awkward situations.
Oh, yeah, those are the sizzlegrams. And Wheeler, he created them for all sorts of scenarios.
Like what?
Well, like dealing with a cheapskate on a date or convincing your spouse to get a haircut, things like that.
Okay, now you've got my attention. Let's hear some of these sizzlegrams in action.
All right, picture this. It's a Saturday night in 1939. You're out with a date who's more interested in counting pennies than having a good time.
Oh, I've been there.
And you're dying to go dancing. How do you get Mr. Tightwad out on the dance floor?
That's a tough one. Do you just come right out and ask him about his salary? Too blunt. If you make up a sob story? Nah, too manipulative. How about casually mentioning a friend who seems to always be out and about?
You're getting warmer. Wheeler actually suggests a line that's even more clever.
Really?
He says to ask, does Jim Brown make more money than you?
Wait, what?
Yeah. Remember those sizzle words we talked about? Well, this question taps into a powerful emotion competition. No one wants to feel like they're lagging behind, especially financially, and by phrasing it as an innocent question, it doesn't put him on the defensive.
That's genius. It's like you're using his own insecurities to get him to loosen up.
It's like a Jedi mind trick.
I'm starting to see why this guy was so successful.
Okay, let's flip the script. Now you're the one trying to avoid spending.
Ooh, I like this.
Your significant other is dropping hints about a new fur coat, but your bank account is saying, no way.
Oh boy, that's a tough spot. Do you suggest a more affordable alternative? Or maybe talk about saving up for it later? Or, what if you appeal to their practical side?
You're on the right track. Wheeler's advice is a bit surprising, and honestly, it might raise a few eyebrows today, but it's a window into the way people thought back then. He suggests focusing on her figure.
Her figure?
Yep. He says to ask, but dear, wouldn't you look slimmer in a black cloth coat?
Wow, really? I guess back in 1939, that was considered a compliment.
Times were different then. But the underlying principle is still about appealing to a deep-seated desire, the desire to look and feel their best.
It's a reminder that communication is always changing. What works in one era might fall flat in another.
Okay, this next one I think is a timeless struggle. You're trying to sleep, but your partner is engrossed in a book, the light shining right in your face.
This one I can relate to. Do you go for a direct approach? Like, honey, could you please turn off the light? Or maybe try a little guilt trip? I have an early meeting tomorrow.
Wheeler actually had a different approach, and this is where things get interesting. He actually gave different advice depending on whether you were dealing with a husband or a wife.
Oh, really? He acknowledged that men and women might respond differently.
He did. For husbands, he suggests a simple tactic. Would you mind reading out loud?
That's brilliant. Most guys would rather do anything than read aloud.
But what about the wives? I doubt they'd be so easily deterred.
That's true.
Well, for the wives, he suggested saying, did you know that too much bed reading eventually causes bags under the eyes?
Wow, he really was focused on appearance, wasn't he? It's definitely a different era,
Yeah.
but I can see how that might have actually worked back then.
Makes you wonder what people will think of our communication styles in the future.
Yeah, like, will our kids be cringing at our emojis and slang?
Who knows?
All right, time for one last scenario before we take a break. Imagine you've maybe had a little too much fun at a party.
Oh, no, I know where this is going.
And your spouse is giving you the side eye. What's the word magic move to smooth things over?
Do you offer a sincere apology, promise to never do it again, maybe shift the blame? No, wait, I got it. You appeal to their sense of humor.
You're close. Wheeler actually recommends a mix of humor and acting like nothing happened. He says to just ask, had your Wheaties yet, dear?
Wait, what? That's it. No explanation, no begging for forgiveness. Nope. He believed that by acting totally normal, you might just throw him off guard and maybe even get a chuckle out of him.
That's bold.
Yeah.
It's like the best defense is a good distraction.
It's like a verbal magic trick.
It really is word magic.
Well, that's it for this part of our deep dive. We'll be back in just a bit with even more word magic, more sizzlegrams, and more vintage advice that might just surprise you.
Can't wait.
Welcome back. Those sizzlegrams are something else, right?
Yeah, I'm still thinking about that Wheaties one.
Right. The guy really was a master of words.
He was, and we've only scratched the surface of his word magic. Ready for more?
Absolutely. Hit me with another sizzlegram.
Okay, imagine it's 1939, and you're a young woman trying to, well, encourage your shy sweetheart to finally propose.
Ooh, sneaky.
He's head over heels, but just can't seem to work up the nerve to ask.
Yeah, how do you nudge him in the right direction without scaring him off?
Well, you got to be subtle. Wheeler suggests creating a sense of vulnerability.
Okay, like damsel in distress vibes.
Exactly. It triggers those protective instincts.
Mm-hmm.
His tested answer is to say, did Willie leave the window up?
Willie? Who's Willie?
Willie's just a stand-in. It doesn't really matter who. The point is to hint at being slightly uncomfortable, like maybe a draft or something.
So he feels the need to protect you, the knight in shining armor.
Exactly. It's all about creating the right atmosphere, setting the stage.
That's so clever. It's not really about Willie or the window at all, is it?
Nope, it's about the underlying message.
Okay, let's try another one. This time, you're a young man, and your date, well, she's a smoker.
All right, back in 39, smoking wasn't exactly taboo, but maybe she's puffing away a bit too much for your liking.
Exactly. How do you suggest she tone it down a bit without sounding like a total killjoy?
Tricky one, even for Wheeler. He knew criticizing a habit head-on usually backfires.
So what's the sizzlegram?
He suggests appealing to her vanity. He says to ask, "Is that nicotine around your lips, dear?"
Whoa, I can't imagine that going over well today.
Probably not, but back then, nicotine stains were a major beauty no-no.
So he's tapping into that fear, hoping it'll be more effective than any logical argument.
It shows how much our perceptions can change over time, doesn't it?
Totally. What might have been a turnoff back then is barely a blip on the radar now.
It just goes to show communication is always evolving.
Okay, here's one that's probably familiar to anyone who's ever shared a bed. You're trying to sleep, but your partner's got the reading light on, right in your face.
Ooh, that's a classic. So do you politely ask them to turn it off? Or maybe try a little guilt trip? "Honey, I'm exhausted. I need to get some sleep."
Well, remember how Wheeler gave different advice for husbands and wives?
Oh, yeah. He had different strategies for different folks.
For husbands, he recommends a simple, would you mind reading out loud?
That's perfect. Who wants to read aloud in bed?
But for wives, he had a different tactic. He suggests saying, did you know that too much bed reading eventually causes bags under the eyes?
There he goes again, focusing on appearance.
It's definitely a product of its time. But hey, it might have worked.
Makes you think what future generations will say about our communication, right?
Right. Okay, let's try another scenario. You've overdone it at a party, and your spouse is not impressed.
Been there. Do you try to explain yourself? Apologize profusely? Or maybe just try to act like nothing happened?
Wheeler recommends a mix of humor and nonchalance. He says to simply ask, had your Wheaties yet, dear?
Are you serious? That's
Right,
all.
yeah.
No groveling, no excuses?
Nope. Wheeler believed that sometimes acting completely normal could throw the other person off balance and maybe even diffuse their anger.
It's like a distraction technique, right?
Exactly. Shifting the focus, lightening the mood.
Okay, this word magic is growing on me.
Okay, now for a situation that anyone with a mother-in-law can relate to.
Oh, this should be good.
She's always offering unsolicited cooking advice, insisting you make her son's favorite dishes exactly the way she used to.
Ooh, that's tricky. Do you try to assert your culinary independence? Or just smile and nod and do things your own way?
Wheeler suggests a clever tactic he calls reverse selling. Instead of resisting, embrace the advice. He says to ask, could you give me those recipes you use?
That's brilliant. You're not actually going to use her recipes, but it makes her feel heard.
Exactly. It's a win-win. You avoid a conflict, and she feels appreciated.
Talk about word magic.
Okay, let's say you're at a dinner party and someone starts gossiping about you, spreading totally false rumors.
Ugh, the worst.
Yeah.
Do you confront them directly or try to ignore it and hope it blows over?
Wheeler's advice is to fight fire with fire, but in a strategic way. He suggests saying, you stop telling lies about me, or I'll tell the truth about you.
Oh, I like that. It turns the tables, makes them think twice about messing with you.
It's like a verbal power move.
I'm definitely adding that one to my repertoire.
Okay, last one for this round. You're at a restaurant and you realize you've forgotten your wallet.
Oh no, that's a nightmare. Especially if you're on a date. Do you make a frantic phone call? Offer to wash dishes?
Wheeler suggests a combination of honesty and authority. He says to say, verify my name and address in the telephone book and I'll sign a check.
The telephone book, that's so old school.
Yeah.
But I get it, it's like a symbol of credibility.
Exactly. It shows you're trustworthy, just a little forgetful at the moment.
Okay, Wheeler, you've impressed me. Some of his advice might be dated, but he really understood people.
Right. And that's what makes word magic so fascinating. It's not just about cheesy lines, it's about the psychology of communication.
It makes you think, what will people say about how we talk today in the future? They'll be studying our texts and tweets and cringing.
Now that's a scary thought. Welcome back to our deep dive into Elmer Wheeler's word magic. We've covered a lot of ground, haven't we?
We have. From those 5 Wheeler points to all those sizzlegrams, I'm still trying to wrap my head around some of them.
Me too. But even if some of his advice seems a bit outdated, you gotta admit, the guy was onto something.
Oh, absolutely. Understanding your audience, appealing to their emotions, that stuff is timeless.
It really is. And that's what I love about these deep dives. It's not just about history. It's about learning something we can actually use today.
Exactly. And speaking of which, I think it's time to address that big question you raised earlier.
Oh, you mean about whether word magic is really just manipulation in disguise?
That's the one. It's a tough one, isn't it? Because on one hand, these techniques, they can be super effective.
Right. But where do you draw the line between influence and, well, taking advantage of someone?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's an easy answer. It all comes down to intent, really.
Intent.
Yeah, like, are you using these techniques to genuinely connect with someone, understand their needs, and find a solution that works for both of you? Or are you just trying to get what you want, regardless of how it affects the other person?
I see what you mean. It's like any tool. It can be used for good or for bad.
Exactly. A hammer can build a house, or it can, smash a window. It all depends on the person holding it.
So what's the takeaway for our listeners? How can they use word magic in a way that's both effective and, ethical?
Well, I think the key is to focus on building real connections. Wheeler's techniques, they work best when they're based on empathy and understanding.
So it's not about tricks or shortcuts?
No, it's about treating people with respect, even when you're trying to persuade them.
That makes sense. It's like if you approach communication with a manipulative mindset, people are going to pick up on that.
Absolutely. But if you're genuine, if you're really trying to connect on an emotional level, that's when the magic happens.
It's not just about winning an argument or closing a deal. It's about building relationships.
Well said. And that's what makes word magic so fascinating. It reminds us that communication is an art form, one that takes both skill and, well, a little bit of heart.
It's like a dance, where both partners have to be in sync.
I love that analogy. And I think it captures the essence of what Wheeler was trying to teach us. He wanted people to appreciate the power of words, to see how they can connect us, persuade us, even inspire us.
And that's exactly what we've done today, haven't we? We've explored some forgotten wisdom, challenged our own communication habits, and hopefully given our listeners a new perspective on the art of conversation.
I'd say we've done a pretty good job. And so to our listeners, we leave you with this. What kind of word magic will you create? How will you use the power of language to make a positive impact on the world around you? Think about it, experiment, and most importantly, have fun with it.